Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us again for this second session for Tuesdays with CKLS this month. We have Anna Foote with us from the Northeast Kansas Library System, and this is the second part of her Transforming Teen Services presentation, Facilitating Engaging Discussions and Activities. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping updates, and then I'm going to ask Christy if she has anything to share for schools as well. On April 30th, we will have the library directors meeting. That's for all library directors. May 4th, we will have the public library services allotment discussion, talking about future planning and how to use this new CKLS allotment, which is part of your system grant, to the best use of your library. And then on May 26th is the spring fling and full system board meeting. This is the one that is attached to a system plan standard, which is standard number 1. A voting representative must attend and vote in the interest of your library, and that is May 26th. It will be in Salina at Camp Webster. The business meeting is at 1:15, and that's the one that's attached to the standard. And then in the morning, Patty, Gail, and I will be doing our national presentation, Library Ethics 101. It's one that we've presented at ARSL and for the Illinois Heartland Library System. And each time we change the scenarios and we make sure that we use scenarios that are ones that we've either lived or experienced ourselves, or ones that are true to life. And it's a very interactive discussion. And every time we do this discussion, it's different because everybody brings their own perspectives and their own life experiences into it. So I hope you guys can join us for that. The ethics session is just in person at Salina at Camp Webster. The business meeting is online or in person. Okay, Christy, do you have any announcements to make?
Well, we are going to meet right before lunch when the whole group is still talking about the help me out.
Yeah, the schools are going to have a breakout session of ethics. Yes.
So I want you guys to send me anything you want to visit about or information I need to gather. We'll talk about school libraries and ethics, but you know, we haven't seen each other all year, so we can talk about anything you want. Just let me know.
Thank you, Christy. I don't have anything else to mention. Oh, I was going to talk about chat and discussion. This is an interactive workshop, so Anna's going to be asking a lot of questions. You can put your comments in the chat. You can anonymously send them to myself or Christy, and we will break in and ask those questions or comments. Or you can unmute yourself and ask the question live as well. All right, thank you, Anna. Take it away.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Yeah, just to reiterate what Mary Beth said, please do break in at any time with comments, questions, whether that's through chat or unmuting yourself. I'm really informal, so want to make sure that this session is what you need out of it. So as Mary Beth mentioned, this is Transforming Teen Services, Facilitating Engaging Discussion and Activities. And spoiler alert, these are really these facilitation skills really would work with any type of group, you know, just sort of scaled for age. So really everything we're talking about here today would definitely work with adults too. So if you have a mixed group or you also work with adults, you're going to be able to double dip today. And then just a quick mention, I know that most of you were with us in the morning, so some of this is going to be repetitive, although I do know we have some additional people, so I am going to go through everything, just maybe not quite as much detail as I did this morning. This is a grant-funded program sponsored by YALSA, IMLS, and COSLA, and all of those groups are national level groups. And if you're unfamiliar, you can easily find more information just by searching them. I should mention at this point too, Mary Beth's already posted the link to the handouts folder, but I will also be sending her the slides and any shared documents that we create together so that she will be able to make those available to you as well. And then of course the recording will be available too. So anything you see on the slides, you will have a chance to see again. Okay, our agenda for today, we're going to do quick introductions. We're going to talk about the outcomes that we want to see out of today. As I mentioned, this is a grant-funded program, so we're going to go over the outcomes at the beginning, and then I'll have them up at the end. We're going to allow time at the end of our time together for you to fill out an evaluation for the funders for this program, and they'll ask, one of the things the evaluation asks about is the outcomes for today, whether we met those. We're also going to get into learning agreements. We're going to talk about the difference between training or teaching versus facilitating. We're going to get into some specific facilitation approaches and activities. And we'll talk about troubleshooting some things that might come up while you are facilitating groups. And then we'll do a little bit of action planning. And then, as I mentioned, we'll leave some time for evaluation. Oh, and since this is a facilitated session about facilitation, I may step back every now and then and be like, see what I did just there, and that kind of thing. So we'll sort of be getting a little meta at times too, like talking about facilitating while we're having a facilitated discussion. So here we go. So if you would just take a moment to put your name, job title, and your library or school in the chat, that would be great. I am Youth and School Services Consultant for Northeast Kansas Library System. I'm also a book nerd from way back, and I'm a former teen. So here are some pictures of me as a teenager, and I'll give you just a few minutes to go ahead and drop your information into the chat so we can get a little conversation started. Great, continue to type if you're doing so. I'm going to go ahead and move us on. Thanks for introducing yourselves and getting some conversation started right away today. So our outcomes for this afternoon are, I have to, sorry, move my little windows here so I can read them. One is to understand effective strategies for engaging people in discussion and activities. 2, learn specific facilitation techniques that are effective for leading and managing groups. And 3rd, to troubleshoot a few potential challenges that may occur during group activities. So that's kind of what we're looking to do today. Any questions about those or comments? Okay. So first, I wanted to get into our learning agreements. So agreements are just in this context, agreements are a shared set of guidelines or ground rules to inform and steer the group's work together. So this is one of those times where I'll step back a little bit and say, this is one of the things that's really important, especially as you're forming a group, is to come up with these agreements. In the interest of time today, since we have such a short amount of time together, I went ahead and proposed a few agreements, but we can certainly add to what I've proposed. So our community agreements, and we'll talk a little bit more about creating agreements in the next section, but our agreements that I would like to suggest for today are to be present, to accept some things are out of your control, to be willing to try unfamiliar technology. I'm just going to pause there for a moment. You may have noticed that there's a little bit more here to this one than what we had for this morning's agreements. Part of what changed when this, when COVID came along and this unit, we used to do these in person and it would be more like 2 or 3 hours. But when we had to convert to the online environment, everybody was doing the same thing. And so the people who were wanting to learn more and hone their facilitation skills were really wondering about, how do I do this in an online environment? So that's part of why there are some additional community agreements, accepting that some things are out of your control, my cat is napping right now over to my right, but there's no saying that she won't have, she won't be on the desk before this is over. And so, things like that. And then also trying unfamiliar technology. When we did start to do so many more things online, we kind of had a lot more new tools that we were working with. So that's just a pause in the middle there. Other community agreements that I would like to suggest for us today are take care of your learning needs. That means if you need to get up and stretch, get up and stretch. Please ask questions for clarification or make points to clarify and help others learn. And then also would ask that you be open to share, respect, and learn. And then step back and step up. This isn't quite as crucial in an online environment because we are able to chat so much together, like written chat. And then also, we can take turns verbally unmuting ourselves. But if the idea is if you see that you're talking a lot and contributing a lot, maybe take a moment to step back and let somebody else talk, but vice versa too. If you're not, if you have something to contribute and you haven't said much lately, please go ahead and step up and do that. And then also acknowledging the difference between intent and impact. That's just the idea that sometimes what we intend to mean or say has a different impact than we meant. And the impact that it had on another person is also valid. So just understanding that sometimes there's a difference there. So those are the learning community agreements I would like to propose for this afternoon. Does anybody have a question or a comment about those? And or do you have a suggestion of anything else we might want to add? Give it a second. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come along, but if you are typing, go ahead and do so, and we'll visit the chat as needed. So now let's talk a little bit. This is kind of one of those points where we step back, and this is a handout that you had, creating your own agreement. So for groups that you are leading, and as I mentioned already, I would suggest that if this is a group that's going to be kind of a standing group, like maybe a book club or anime club or whatever it is that, maybe the same core group of people or the exact same people are going to be meeting week after week or monthly or whatever it is, starting from scratch with those agreements can be useful. Whenever I do this, I always go in with a few in my back pocket, so to speak, so that I can propose some if the group really is at a loss, but kind of prime the pump as far as the discussion goes. But some questions to consider with your groups as you're forming them. And it's not that you have to do it from the very beginning either. If you're having a group that meets regularly, you can say, hey, I learned this. Let's see if this will work for our group, and let's try these learning agreements or group agreements, whatever you want to call them. So some questions to consider would be, what would make this group work well for you, including, considering your communication style? And then what would make this a safe and respectful space for everyone? We talked a little bit this morning at that session about bullying in certain situations. And I think this is one that's, if you get people to agree up front that we want this to be a safe and respectful space, that, this group is a safe space, if that starts to go off the rails, you go back to the agreements and you say, look, we all agreed to this. What can we do to make this true, this true for our group? Along those lines too, I was just reminded myself that you should post whatever your agreements are. You should post them for every meeting if you're having in-person meetings, or as we did here on an online situation, went through them and at least showed them to everybody. Kind of depends on the group and what you think. You may not have to actually go over them every time. You may just be able to say, oh, remember our agreements, here they are. But if the group has been hitting a rocky space and you really want to kind of bring those back to the fore, it might be time to revisit them. And I would suggest, revisiting them occasionally because, groups change and people come and go and that kind of thing. You want to make sure everybody still has that same understanding and agreement to the agreements. And then I just blew past our agreements without doing the thing that I was supposed to do last, which is making sure everybody agreed with them. So let's go back. So yeah, the final thing you want to do when you're creating agreements or when you're going over them again is to make sure that everybody agrees. So here are our agreements. And if you agree to those today, please put yes in the chat. And in person, we would ask for people to give thumbs up or thumbs down or even thumbs sideways and talk through any of the thumbs down or the thumbs sideways. And so, but in the Zoom environment, at least, chat seems to be the best way to keep track of it. And I'm seeing lots of yeses coming across, so thank you, everybody. Okay. And, you know, ideally you want to make sure you got 100%, but I know some of you are trying to work a desk and things like that too. So not everybody may be able to type yes, but is there anybody who has any objections or any amendments to our agreements? Okay, well, hearing none, let's go back to talking about creating agreements. So obviously there are lots of other questions you could ask as far as prompting people to what you're trying to elicit with the agreements, or what will make this particular group work. So those are just a couple of suggestions, but then do make sure that everybody agrees before you move on. And I thought I had one more slide on that section. So any questions or comments about creating agreements? Anywhere you could see this might be useful in your current work?
This is Patty. I think this would be very vitally important to the processes of strategic planning. Make sure all stakeholder voices are heard.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. And we're getting a couple of other comments. Amy says it's always too good to go over so everyone is on the same page. Yeah, and Mary Beth says, I can see how this shows a newcomer the values and culture of the group. Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage you, when you do have newcomers, they may be a little bit shy to speak up at first, but do always, ask, have that empty bullet point, so to speak, ask, is there something we need to add? And by that same token, as you're revisiting them, maybe after a few months, maybe there's something you don't need on there anymore. It really, it's pretty group specific, but can be very useful in helping keep groups on track. All right, thank you for that. We will move on now to differences between training and facilitating. This is another handout that is available to you. And the handouts, a lot of the handouts for this session are basically just copies of the slides. So I wanted you to be able to look at them in advance if you wanted to, but you'll also, as I mentioned, have a copy of the slide deck available to you. So training versus facilitating. So trainers or teachers give information and skill, they direct learning, they operate from specific outcomes, and they plan a sequence of activities to achieve outcomes, and they move from known to known. So basically the idea that here's a certain body of knowledge I want you to have, and I'm going to help you build up and get that knowledge. Really that's important too, for sure. What we're talking about today more is the facilitation side of it, which is facilitators guide interaction, and they facilitate co-learning and learn with the group, operate from an overarching goal, and present resources but don't have a specific lesson plan, and move from known to unknown, sort of the idea of opening up the conversation a little bit more. So I'm just going to give it a moment for you all to look over these, even though I read them all, and also just to comment in chat. Do you see yourself as more of a facilitator or a trainer? Cool. So the people who kind of said one over the other were about, it looks like maybe about half and half. And then a lot of people are saying both, and it depends on the situation. I think that's a good place to be, to kind of have all of those skills and depending on what's necessary, be able to draw on any of them at any time. Continue to chat if you are doing so, but we are going to explore these ideas quite a bit more in the next few slides. So I am going to move us on. So for those of you who joined us this morning and got to do some Padlets, we're going to do a couple more Padlets this afternoon. This one, the link will be coming into chat here pretty soon, but basically it's just working with those ideas of trainers or teachers versus facilitators and answering some questions. So I'm going to move us over to the Padlet, and once we get there, just join me when you get the link. There we go. Mary Beth's got the link in there. So the questions that we have are, why or when would using a trainer teacher approach be important with teens be important in libraries? And number 2 is, why or when would using facilitation skills with teens be important in libraries? 3, how could you improve your training skills? And 4, how could you improve your facilitation skills? So we'll take a few minutes to fill those in. And if you haven't used a Padlet before, just go down to the bottom underneath where those questions are, and it should say add comments for you, and click in there and type and just hit the enter button like you would with chat, and they should show right up. And all of your answers will most likely, they should come across as anonymous. So feel free to be as open as you want to be. And once we have a few responses, we'll start to go through them and debrief a bit.
Linda, I see that you might be having some trouble. You can put your comment in the chat or send it to me privately, and I'll put it on the Padlet for you. If you're having a little trouble, click that link. I'm going to put the direct link instead of the bit.ly link, and see if that helps you a little bit as well. And then what you do is you click on the add comment part and then type in your comment, hit enter or return on the keyboard, or hit the little arrow, and that should get your comment on there. But if not, you can send me your comment privately, and I'll try to put it in the right one. Let me know if you're doing 1, 2, 3, or 4, and I can put it in there for you.
All right, well, it looks like comments are starting to slow down just a little bit. Please go ahead and continue to comment if you were planning on doing so, though, and I'm just going to start to run through these a little bit. Certainly won't read everything, but just try to summarize quickly as we're moving through. So number one, why or when would using a teacher-trainer approach with teens be important in libraries? So things like specific skills, learning skills, researching, going over details and instructions, bringing up something new. Oh, and then here's somebody who got kind of behind the why a little bit. I think that it would be good to use a trainer-teacher approach with teens in the library because then they see you as someone that they can go to instead of just another face. Yeah, absolutely. A way to facilitate, even though you're teaching, a way to have some interaction with them. I like that. And then, yeah, something it needs to be done in a certain way, technique, skills, safety, life skills. Great. And then number two, why or when would using facilitation skills with teens be important in libraries? Oh, to resolve conflicts. That's interesting. Yeah, definitely. That is definitely facilitation. So things like, trying to find books for literary circles, book talks, programs where you want discussion. Yeah. And then somebody says with teen boards and programs where you're trying to get them to open up and share. Yeah, absolutely. When wanting teens to take a lead or active role in a group, programs, especially those that are attendee driven. Here's an interesting point. Yeah, when adding a program that the teens want to attend, but you are not familiar with the subject, such as coding or robotics, you'd facilitate the program and learn along with the participants. Yeah, and I think that's something that can be really important in doing engaging teen activities is to let them be the teachers, for those, a lot of times, well, everybody wants to be recognized for what they know and their talents and their abilities. And as we saw, for those of you who were able to attend this morning, that's especially developmentally important for, as teens age and want to feel more competent and ready to head out into the world and identify more with their peer groups. So, and then I saw some other comments up here. Just practicing. I think we're getting into the could you improve your training skills. A couple people say listen and ask questions. Yeah, we're going to see that on one of our handouts later. There are at least a couple of kinds of listening suggested for being a good facilitator or a good trainer too. Practice and seek help, attend trainings, be open to really listen and not react over emotionally. Yeah. One of the things, like when I became a continuing education consultant, is it kind of ruined me for going to trainings for myself because I'm always evaluating like, okay, I could use that, or this person would be really good to present or whatever. But yeah, that's absolutely right. When you attend trainings, think about what's going on at that training and what can you take and use at your library or in your work. Okay, and let's move on to number 4. How could you improve your facilitation skills? I said practice, of course. Involve teens in conversation, getting to know the teens in the community better, listen, practice, encourage, ask and listen. Practice, listen, and put aside preconceived notions or stereotypes of teens. Let go being in charge. Yeah, that's one of the things that's a little bit scary about facilitation is you really have to trust the group to kind of come along with you. And I'm so grateful that you all are doing that right now. It's had a great conversation this morning and it's continuing this afternoon. So thank you for participating. It makes it just so much more meaningful. And, you can only listen to my voice for so long. So yeah, just lots of practice, listening, those kinds of things. Anybody have any additional comments or questions about what I know that was a real quick through, and like I said, you'll get a copy of this so you can look at it more closely or have it for the future. I do eventually erase these, I just reuse them, but you will have everything captured. I will capture everything that is here for you today. So
We have the most teens love to show adults how to do something. And then the response to that was they love showing how they can do something and do it better. LOL.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. All right, well, thank you for that. Let's go back to our slides. Okay, so we are going to stick with facilitation a little bit more, and I would like for you to think back to a group that you've participated in. It may be the group that you were facilitating, or it may be one that you were a participant, or it could be a mixture. It doesn't have to be a single group by any means, but anytime you were in a group that was well facilitated. And we have some more questions on a different Padlet that we're going to go to. And here's another one of those times where I kind of step out of the actual facilitation and point out what I'm doing to you. What we're going to do is called, and what we did just now is called a graffiti activity. If you're in person, one of the ways to do this is to put up chart paper around the wall and then give people markers and have them go around, and each sheet has a question on it and people go around. And so that's where the title graffiti activity comes from. It's a little bit different in the online environment, but that's what we have Padlet for. And Mary Beth has put that link in the chat. I'm going to head over there so we can watch the responses go up, and I will read you the questions when we get there. 1, what are the traits of a good facilitator? 2, what makes it challenging to facilitate groups? And 3, how does it feel to facilitate a group? And again, sorry for those of you the Padlet's not really working for. Feel free to continue to put your answers in chat. And if you want to be anonymous, as Mary Beth said, you can send it directly to her. Okay, well, keep going if you're still typing. We're just going to start to summarize up a little bit. For traits of a good facilitator, I would say the word listener or listening is definitely the winner in this category, and absolutely true. Someone just commented about good communication. Yes, allowing everybody's voices to be heard. Patient, calm, understanding, a good listener and clear talker. Yes. Being receptive to others' ideas, able to draw out the quiet ones. Yes, lots of good stuff. Prepared. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Sometimes you have to, as a facilitator, maybe over prepare because you're not sure which which technique is going to work best. But, as you get to know your group better, that might be a little, you may not have to prepare quite as much, but having kind of backup plans and then backup plans for those backup plans can be important at times. Again, it depends on the function of your group and what your objectives are for as far as what you want this group to accomplish and those kinds of things. But yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, thanks. Somebody else just added, I think, in this section. Okay, a couple of good ones coming through. Being honest if you don't know something and then follow up with the information. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's kind of like, as librarians, that's just, I feel like that just rolls off my tongue. I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. That's kind of our MO at times, is that, we don't, sometimes people say to me, friends or whatever, oh, you're a librarian, you know everything. It's like, no, but I can find out almost anything. So, which isn't exactly true, but I'll dig until I find something good. So, and then being comfortable with silence. Yeah, we're going to talk about wait time when we get into the techniques. And it can be really uncomfortable, but being comfortable with the silence, giving people that thinking time that they might need. And in an online environment, it's a little bit even more difficult because you can't read body language in most cases. And I'm never sure if somebody's typing in chat on Zoom and I don't want to cut people off. But yeah, so you kind of, the silence, being comfortable with that is something that is important. And then what makes it challenging to facilitate groups? Speaking up in public, a couple people mentioned that. Different personalities, getting the group involved to interact, overly opinionated participants. I would say those two are we're going to talk about, our troubleshooting section is going to be on everybody talking versus nobody talking. So you guys are kind of touching on that and where we're going to go with some of our troubleshooting process and thoughts together. I think that it can be a challenge to facilitate when occasionally get the rowdy, disrespectful teen. Yeah, kind of goes back to your agreements. And even if it's more of just like in the library situation that you may not have, you haven't sat down with the 6 people who came in that afternoon and created agreements, you should all have your patron code of behavior, which is kind of like agreements, only not everybody's agreed to them up front necessarily, but sometimes you have to kind of point to those. And it's a similar sort of thing when you do have your agreements with your more ongoing type of groups where, except they've been created together, obviously. If your group isn't responsive or participating, yes, that is definitely a challenge. Hesitant participation, getting all involved rather than just a few more vocal active participants. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I left that step up, step back one on our agreements for today. As I mentioned, sometimes it's not quite as important when so many people can participate at once, like on this Padlet or in the chat, but in person it gets to be, it can be a challenge for sure. Different personality types and people getting distracted too easy, like when the board meeting goes into chit chat mode. Yeah. Having just enough structure. Yeah, that's definitely a balance for sure. Making it fun while still learning something and finding the right balance between casual fun versus going off track from the main purpose. Yep. Okay, and how does it feel to facilitate a group? Challenging but rewarding, can be scary. Love to see the aha moments. Hard to let go of control. Yeah. I think that it can be a bit intimidating to facilitate, but at the end of the day, making those connections with them is beyond rewarding. This is neat. I love that when they ask for the answer, I step back and smile, encouraging them to work through the discussion. Yeah, and maybe pointing to some resources if they need them, but yeah, letting them figure it out, that co-learning. So it can feel challenging with the quiet group, fun with an interactive or participating group. Yeah, the quiet time where you're not supposed to contribute, that can be a challenge as the facilitator. And when you see you finally connected, you feel triumphant. Yes, great conversation. Thank you all for sharing that. Any other comments or questions about that stuff? All right, let's go back to our slideshow then. So now we're going to get into our third handout, which is facilitation approaches and activities. So this handout is divided into two sections, and there's Mary Beth just put the direct link to it there. It's also included in the folder that she sent out to people. So this is divided into two sections: strategies to encourage participation and strategies for facilitating discussions. And that's kind of a way of saying reining people in when needed, or, you know, making sure there's a smooth flow of conversation going on. So let's take a look at this handout together a bit. It's pretty wordy. I'm definitely not going to read it all to you. I'm just going to hit the highlights on a few things and talk about a little bit of difference between how this works for some of these, how they work in person versus how they can work in an online environment. So we've talked a lot about learning agreements already, but some ground rules. And as I mentioned, you know, when you're in person, you can have everybody give you a thumbs up, where you can kind of see around the room. And in the online setting, the best way I've found, as I mentioned, was using the chat yes for Zoom, and then just also making sure before you move on, that you've got at least most of the people and given people a chance to voice any questions or dissent. We talked a little bit about graffiti activities also. So where you, if you're in person, you can post charts around the room and let people answer those. And then online, you can use Padlet. Google also has a product called Jamboard that's pretty cool. It works pretty similarly to Padlet. I had already started using Padlet, so I just stuck with that. But I've used Jamboard as a participant, and it works well. One other one on the encouraging well, actually, I'm going to mention two. I'm going to mention the last two on the sheet. Creative teach back. If you were with us this morning, that's what we did when we did the 6-word memoir. So basically, you might have some information that has different sections. And when you're in person, you may want to visually be able to see, like, okay, 6 people are working on this section, and 5 people are working on this section, and 4 people are working on that section. That's good. We've got enough, you know, of the groups kind of working to cover it all. And so you would have people a lot of times work in small groups where they would read the information, digest it, and then do something creative as a presentation. The 6-word memoir, it could be a skit, it could be an infomercial, it could take really any form that you would want. And it depends, again, on, you know, your group's purpose and how long they have and that kind of thing. I liked doing the 6-word memoir in the format that we did because we were able to share those on chat. And even though you weren't able to work in small groups, it did give you a chance to participate. And if you notice, I didn't say everybody had to participate. So if people didn't want to, that was fine as well. So that's one thing that it seems to me to work well in this environment. So you do have the option, though, in Zoom of doing breakout rooms. So like if we had more time together, I certainly would, like, you know, try to maybe divide people out by the age they wanted to work with and be a little bit more formal about it. But I think it works well either way. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. The other thing is partner and small group activities. On some of the comments that we've had already today, it's like, how do you get people to participate if they are shy or they're not comfortable talking in front of a big group? Sometimes that can be helpful, is to have people just turn and talk to somebody next to them, or in a small group. I know I I've kind of grown out of it a little bit since I've done so much training and facilitating. I'm much more comfortable talking in front of larger groups now, but as a younger person and as a teenager, for sure, I was much more comfortable turning and talking to one person next to me or talking in a small group. And then depending on the situation, you may want that group, you may want the groups to report back what they've said. I try to always avoid saying, Sally, will you be the one to present for your group? Because maybe Sally's, and I don't know Sally very well, she's the shyest person in that group, whereas, you know, Sam next to her is all raring to go and talk. And so, you know, letting people get to where they're comfortable. That's one of the benefits of not being in a school setting. I'm sorry, some of you are, but not being like in a teaching mode, being more in a facilitation mode. It allows you to be a little more flexible that way and to trust that people will learn what they need to and get what they need to from it based on how they choose to behave in the group, as long as they're abiding by the agreements, of course. So, and as I mentioned, Zoom does have breakout rooms. So that was what I wanted to say about, and obviously there are a few more here, but and lots more out there in the world, but that's what I wanted to say about strategies to encourage participation. Anybody have a comment, question, anecdote about those? Anything you've tried that's worked or not worked, or how you might tweak something in the future?
There's one comment in the chat about, I'll be honest, icebreaker games are not my favorite.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of people feel that way. And sometimes they fall flat. Yeah, I think you really have to, you kind of have to know your group. Sometimes people, you know, if it's a group of people who don't know each other very well, they may not want to tell two truths and a lie in front of a group. So one of the things I like about these strategies is it's not like an ABC, you have to follow all of these. So, and I'm not a huge fan of icebreakers either, but sometimes it can help. Okay, hey, Linda, if you're interested, tell us about some truly great icebreakers. And feel free to unmute yourself if you want to, or chat. I've never really found a foolproof icebreaker, but since I'm not a huge fan, I don't use them a whole lot sometimes. I mean, I guess today what we did, I asked you to put in chat, you know, your name and title and where you're from. So that's kind of like sort of breaking ice a little bit. Not with anything terribly personal. And a lot of you, I'm sure, already know each other from going to events like this. If Linda is, yeah.
I guess my experience with icebreakers have been mostly in elementary classes early on.
Okay.
And I was going to add one fun icebreaker that I did with a group not too long ago. It was with PLS, and they asked a question that's pretty open-ended. It's like, do you like this, yay or nay? And then you got the conversation going. And it was like, are pickles good, yes or no? Or something along those lines. And, you know, it's something that you can get polarized without people getting angry about whether you like pickles or not. So I thought that was a pretty good icebreaker.
Yeah, I like that. And that's that's not terribly personal either. Like I'm not offended if you like pickles. I'm not offended if you don't like pickles. And I bet you don't care whether I like pickles or not either, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. I got the conversation going.
Yeah, for sure.
Patty says, when we have used icebreaker games at CKLS events, it has been to share ideas that you might use with your library patrons. Linda says, giving out secret identities and having them find their twin. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. And Michael says, I don't know. I know some people who are pretty passionate about pickles. So
true, Michael, true. Yeah, and I guess, sometimes I like Patty's comment because, you know, relating the icebreaker instead of to something maybe personal about somebody, it's about the subject of the meeting or like that, you know, something that sort of primes them for whatever subject it is you're going to talk about too, can sort of open the conversation. All right, thank you, everybody. Let's move on. Oh, and Danielle says, I like never have I ever. I'm constantly thinking of things that I've done that would give me the most points. And Patty says that CKLS events, never have you ever games have been fun. Cool. We'll keep those ideas coming in the chat. And we will go over them if we need to. So, okay, let's move on to the second page of that handout, strategies for facilitating discussions, also known as directing discussions when needed, reining people in when needed, those kinds of things. So as you can see, the whole active listening and paraphrasing is big. As many of you mentioned in our previous discussion today, listening is so important. And then as far as asking open-ended questions and follow-up questions, I wanted to talk in a little bit of detail about the three at the bottom here. Stacking, you may have seen, I didn't know what this was called. I'd experienced it before and probably even used it, but it's basically when you've got like three people just dying to say something, you know, like got their hand up. And so it's as the facilitator saying, okay, Jackie's talking now, then we'll have John, and then we'll have Bill. And so letting people know that that they're in line now. And so, because I know if I'm Bill in the back of the room, and I don't know if somebody's seen me and I've got my hand up and I really want to say something, that allows me to just calm down and be like, okay, I'm going to get my turn, and now I can listen to what's actually going on. So, and then if you are in person, you can give a physical reminder, like a stuffed toy or a ball that the speaker's holding, and everyone else remains silent. And so when you're stacking, you would say, okay, Jackie's going to give the ball to John and then to Bill. So we'll move on that way. Online, this isn't quite as crucial, as I kind of have been mentioning, because if you encourage people to use chat, you can always go back to the chat and then follow up and ask those who have chatted to unmute or explain themselves further in chat. And having kind of overlapping ideas or conversations, you can kind of go back through that thread and sort of untangle it and continue on the conversation. And then the suggestion box or parking lot, suggestion box, these can function the same way. A suggestion box is a little bit more discreet, I guess you would say, or can be a little more anonymous for people. When I do in-person meetings, I have a lot of Post-it notes and pens and toys on the table and everything. So if people want to bring up something that maybe they don't want to say in front of the whole group, or they have something that's maybe slightly off topic, they can write it down on a Post-it and then just drop it in the suggestion box, maybe during a break or something like that. And then I always make sure to go through those and see if there's anything that needs to be addressed. It's not immediate most of the time, but it does allow people to be a little bit anonymous. And I was going to point out, I really like that that's something that your CKLS staff does for you, is allow you to message them privately during meetings and with questions or comments, so that you're able to, be as forthcoming as you need to be without worrying about repercussions. So I like that a lot. It's a really great practice, and we've started to adopt that at NEKLS. So thank you, CKLS staff. One way to do this in an online environment is to do a shared document that can be running. So just everybody has a link to a Google document, for example, and can add their questions or their comments, and then everybody can still access it afterwards. A parking lot is just a little bit different from the suggestion box. That would just be a piece of chart paper on the wall with a marker near it where people can just go up and write down. It's typically intended mostly for things that may be a little bit off topic, but feel the person who wants to ask that question or make that comment feels that it's important. And so it allows the conversation to continue to flow, but also capture some of those things that might be tangential but still important. And then wait time, we've already alluded to that today. It's they say in person to wait 3 to 5 seconds after you ask a question to start accepting answers, and then it allows the people who maybe a little bit take a little bit longer to formulate their thoughts. I know I do this a lot. I tend to need to jot something down or think it through what I'm going to say before I say it. So I'm not one of those people who has her hand up first, because I usually need a little time to think. And so it gives people that time to think, and then people can consider their responses for those who need a little bit more time. So the part that's really challenging with this is being the facilitator and just asking that question and then closing your mouth. I know it's really hard for me. And in virtual sessions, as I sort of alluded to earlier, it's even more important because you're not sure if somebody's maybe putting something in the chat, or, sometimes it takes a little bit more to clue into what's going on and come up with that. So it may be an uncomfortably long wait time, but it usually is for the best. So let me try this. Any comments or questions on the strategies for facilitating discussions? Okay, if you're typing, go ahead and keep doing so. So those are the strategies I wanted to talk about specifically today. And as I mentioned, you've got a few more there to look at and a lot more out there in the world.
We do have one comment. Linda says that she really likes the stacking idea.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think it really does help people to listen when they know my turn's coming. So yeah, good. I'm glad. That'll be useful. All right. Let's see, what is next? Okay, here's a small section I added on online facilitation specifically. When I converted this to online, everything else in the world, it seemed like, was converting to online also. And so there were lots of questions about how do I facilitate online meetings. And I know that now things are opening up a little bit better, or a bit, more. This may not be as much of a concern, but I think there's always, I don't know that, I think there will always be a time and a place for online meetings now. So I would like to cover this just briefly with you. We're not going to get into all 7 of them very much depth at all. I do want to point out that this comes from a website and a consultant. The website is developmentwithoutlimits.org. And Jennifer Brady actually works with the Transforming Teen Services team to help us learn how to facilitate. So she has some great things on her blog there, and the next page will list a couple of recommendations. And thank you, Mary Beth, for putting her website in the chat. So for online facilitation, one of the things that Jennifer says is really important is setting super clear expectations. So she suggests, and I've broken her rule with this session, but she suggests to have just one main thing you want people to get. And because I was trying to kind of hybridize this longer in-person session and with a 90-minute webinar, I went ahead and stuck with the 3 objectives that we talked about. But I think and so ideally in her world, I would have just one, but I felt like I want to do more with you. So hopefully we're covering all 3 okay. She also included in this under like the agreements and like, here's what we're going to do today, here's how we're going to do it. So the way that I went through the agenda with you and kind of told you a little bit about what to expect, doing that up front, covering the agreements up front, that helps set the expectations. The flipped approach for number 2 is, we didn't really necessarily do that today. But the idea there is giving people some kind of handout or learning to do in advance and then working together on a project. So I know you're all very busy, so it wasn't like I wanted you to have to study all of those paragraphs under the techniques for facilitation. So, but that could be something if you were doing a little bit of a longer session or a different type of session, maybe an ongoing group where you would do ask people to do a little bit of work in advance and then use your time together as a work group. I think we've kind of got a hybrid going on with that today. And then I'm just going to talk about 3 and 4, and then we'll move on. 3, acknowledge the technology. That's under our agreements earlier today, or at the beginning of the session when we were talking about admit that or understand there are things out of your control. I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but knowing that, you know, my internet could go out at any moment, and I would hope that hope that CKLS staff could step in and keep the conversation going until I could figure out how to fix it or whatever it is. And then, you know, and I also mentioned the whole Padlet, that may have been new for some of you. So just acknowledging we're using these new technologies, and maybe they'll work the way we want and maybe they won't, and that's okay. And then for promote video, we didn't do that a whole lot today either because we've got a lot going on. But, you know, especially if you don't have like a formal, more like slideshow, all these resources that I've been kind of bringing up on my screen, asking people to have their video on so that you can have a little bit more of a conversation and people can do the grid of videos and see each other. So, and that goes along with number 5, I guess, intentionally building community. That's part of it. Oh, and Linda's going back to the stacking and saying, otherwise their own comment is interfering with listening. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that wondering, am I going to get to say what it is I really want to say? For sure. Okay. Any comments or questions on this page so far? And I mentioned that there are some great articles from Development Without Limits. The blog, the last time I actually did this session, it's been a few months. And so I had some suggestions for specific ones, including these 2. They're a little bit older now and there's a lot more great stuff. And I honestly haven't had a chance to explore it all, but the articles are really great. They're short, they're kind of bullet pointed, they're very to the point about how to lead online groups, and they're all free. So you can just go on, when you go to that website, look for the blog tab and just sort of scroll through and see what might be interesting. And then the 12 ways to engage participants in pre-recorded sessions, that's actually on a different website. So Mary Beth has put that link into the chat for us. And it's also, when you have, it's linked here when you have, when you will have a copy of these slides. All right. So I wanted to talk about a few of the skills a little bit more, just in a tiny bit more detail. So the whole active listening and paraphrasing, making eye contact when possible. So as the facilitator, having your face on the screen. Another part of active listening is not interrupting, giving signs of listening. That's a little harder again on the online environment, but you know, nodding, saying yeah, just, you know, sort of nonverbal. Rephrase and reflect. So I think somebody mentioned paraphrasing earlier, definitely, so that to make sure that you're checking your understanding and helping others understand what has been said, and then asking for clarification if needed. And then we already talked about stacking. I got ahead of myself, but just giving an order to who will speak next. And I could see, you know, if you're in a, you might even, you know, in order to sort of help people who learn differently, like you could say it out loud, and then if you have a whiteboard behind you, even write it out, you know, the list of the people who'll be talking. That could get cumbersome if that's going on through the whole meeting, but it could be something that could be useful in certain situations. And then wait time. Again, got ahead of myself, I suppose, but just remembering to pause after asking a question and letting people process, and making it uncomfortable for yourself as the facilitator. So, or maybe it's not as uncomfortable for you as it seems to be for me at times. Okay, so here's what I promised with troubleshooting. What I'm calling common but opposite problems. Nobody talking versus everybody talking. So let's go to the Padlet, and I'll see you over there. Once that gets into the link gets into the chat for you. There it is. Thank you, Mary Beth. So to think about this, just some questions to prompt our discussion. Why might nobody be talking? 2, why might everybody be talking at once? 3, what techniques can you try when nobody's participating? And 4, what techniques can you try when everybody is talking at once? And I would encourage you on number 3 and 4, obviously we've already talked about some and you can certainly put those in there, but maybe think about something else that you might try or that you've tried and works. Wow, lots of great answers here, responses. Looks like things are slowing down a bit, but if you're typing, please continue to do so. Let's just go through and sort of try to summarize these quickly. You will have a copy of all of these answers, so If I skip over something that you really wanted to capture, you will get this information. I'll get it together this afternoon and send it to Mary Beth, and she can get it out to you later this week. So why might nobody be talking? Nobody wants to go first. People are embarrassed. Technology, yeah, technology can be an issue. A lot of kids have social anxiety and self-confidence and fear of getting judged. Don't feel knowledgeable. Oh yeah, here's something that really resonates, I think, for teenagers sometimes. Afraid their comment will be the opposite of everybody else's opinion, wanting to see if anybody else feels the same way. And then somebody mentioned if you don't use your wait time and you're not giving people a chance to talk, then they may not be talking for that reason. And then why might everybody be talking at once? People are passionate. They're really exciting conversation and everybody wants to have their say at once. People are excited about the topic. Oh, here's one, not wanting someone to take their idea by saying it first. Powerful topic. Sure, and somebody mentions, I think that kids start talking all at once when they are extremely excited, but you also have the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe they are not entirely interested in what's being discussed. Yeah. And then somebody mentions in a classroom environment, want to talk to get it over with and assure the grade for participation. Yeah, I've experienced that before. And then 3, what techniques can you try when nobody's participating? Open-ended questions, leading questions, breaking the discussion down to smaller pieces. Yeah, sometimes if it's too general, it makes it harder to answer. Yeah. Oh, this is a good facilitation skill. Sometimes you have to share something yourself to get the group going, even if it is off topic, to make them feel comfortable. Open the discussion with questions about the topic, call to mind topics, and perhaps with an example that calls for an opinion. Great, that's a nice way to start things. Maybe moving to small groups first. Or starting with specific examples. Yeah. Reformulating the information or question could help. Absolutely. Great techniques to try. And then what techniques can we try when everybody is talking at once? If virtual, use the mute feature and take control of who gets the floor, stacking. Again, trying with the small group discussions. Yeah, that gives more people a chance to talk at once with still having a group of listeners. Yeah, I like that. And then that same person says, pick someone to represent and bring it all back to the main group in X amount of time. Yeah. Have a talking object, kind of like the ball I mentioned earlier. And then stating, everybody has great ideas and I'm excited. Everyone wants to share, but to make sure that everyone is heard, we need to take turns. Yep. Using a parking lot. Oh, here's an idea if there are too many people for stacking. Cool. Hand out popsicle sticks and they turn them in after they make their statement. That way you don't miss anyone if it's too many for stacking. Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. And then that way that could work too if you're in a group where you maybe don't know everybody's name or they don't have a big enough name tag for you to be able to actually call on them by name. Great. Stacking. Yeah, maybe small groups. That's interesting. Yeah, that you guys touched on. Small groups could work for not talking or for talking too much. I think that's absolutely correct. So cool. That's what I wanted to cover. You guys did a great job bringing out some wonderful ideas here. Anybody have a comment before we move on? Or question? All right. We're not going to get into this too much because you guys really already did this work on the Padlet, but you will have this as part, you will have this as part of a part of the slides when you get them. So if nobody's talking, kind of some questions you could ask yourself are, do they understand? Do they need to think more to formulate their ideas? Are they comfortable? You definitely got on, you basically answered all of those questions, and that was, I could tell some of your thinking as you were responding to the Padlet. And some of your solutions are also there as far as, rephrasing question, giving more information, give more time to think, and allow time for people to get to know each other, those kinds of things. And then for everybody talking, is it because they're so interested? Is it because they're not interested? This is definitely something we touched upon in the Padlet. Is it because they've not heard the topic or unfamiliar with the topic? As you can see online, you can ask people to share their thoughts in chat and then try stacking to regain. Again, you guys were great at pointing out maybe it's time for small groups in an in-person way. And then if they're not interested, as you all mentioned, are there other ways to rephrase the question or provide them with an example to discuss, or maybe it's time to move on to a different topic too. And then if it's because they're not paying attention necessarily, get their attention, check the time, review the agreements, and then give more resources and information as needed. And I see a question that came along in chat, and yeah, it's about how to engage teens who are overworked with schools, sports, other activities, and or groups without making them feel obligated or overwhelmed. I definitely want to hear what anybody in our room here today has to say about this. I had a couple of thoughts about this. I know that, when so many teens were doing online school, what I was hearing from public libraries was that teens did not want to get online to talk to their librarians, their public librarians, just because they felt like they were online all the time. And I think that's okay, and we're coming out of that a little bit. We're able to see, most of us are able to see teens a little bit more. And so I think that's helpful, being able to get that face-to-face time. I also think that this may not be a very satisfying answer, but I've been in libraries for a long time, and for a really long time, we've been worried that we are not engaging teens enough, that we're going to somehow lose them forever. And what we see with trends is, teens are just super busy with so many other things, as the person who asked the question mentioned, school, sports, and other activities and groups. And so it may just be natural, especially if we're talking the public library, not seeing them quite as much as we would when they were younger and middle grades. And then a lot of times what we find is, especially as they become young adults, 20 somethings, or when they start families of their own, they come back to the public library. So as I said, that's not necessarily a very satisfying answer, but I think it's okay to allow ourselves a little bit of grace that we're not reaching every teen in town. And then one other thought I guess I might add to that is that there's this idea in serving teens of homago, hanging out, messing around, and geeking out. So just the idea that it's okay for the library to be a space. And if you're in a school, there's some mitigating factors there probably, but the libraries could be just a great space for teens or preteens to hang out, have a safe space, mess around. Patty mentioned this morning that the noise level in a teen area might be a little bit louder or different. The expectation might be a little bit different. Again, following the rules, but giving them a little bit of space to just be comfortable. I think a lot of times we think of reaching teens just in terms of, are they coming to the programs? What are the programs I can do to get them to specifically come to the library for that? And maybe they just need a place to hang out after school and maybe do some homework, or maybe just hang out and decompress with friends for a while. And that's a perfectly legitimate use of your resources, and that is serving teens. One other quick comment, and then I would love to hear what anybody else has to say, is I always tell people to be sure to count, if you have a teen volunteer program, that counts as an actual program. Just because whatever they're helping out with summer activities or something like that for little kids, that's actually a developmentally appropriate activity for them, because they are engaging in their community and they are volunteering. So that definitely counts as serving teens too. And
there
now
is a comment in the chat that says, it's a big one. Even before we were all online, students let me know they were only in an activity because their parents wanted it. So small school dilemma where you can be in everything and some kids are in everything. And then Alice says, thank you, Anna. Before all this, we had teens come to do just that. So.
Good. Yeah. And I hope we get back to that because it is it's an important service. And a lot of times, if you're in a small town, where else are the teens going to go that's open year round, that doesn't cost anything and is, a safe environment for them to just, be their community center in some ways. And then I see that Amy says a few come in to hang out and sometimes others come in for homework and research help. Good.
I think that's important too, to realize that those teens that are just hanging out in your library space, they might be an opportunity later. Let's say you have a big summer library program going on and you need a few extra wranglers of the littles. That might be a resource of like, hey teens, if you're gonna hang out, you gotta help today kind of thing, and volunteer them to help out. And then you kind of, that may be the only time you need them, but it kind of lets them know that we're valued here and we're, they're going to ask us to help if we can. So yeah. I think that's kind of a cool opportunity too.
Absolutely. And Linda says she likes voluntel. Absolutely. So great. Yeah, thanks for discussing that with me. Any other ideas about that, how to reach teens? Any other questions about anything we've covered today? I think we're kind of towards the end of, we do have the action plan. We'll take a couple minutes for that. But before we move on to that, any questions or comments about teen services in general? Raimi says that teens need to know their help is valuable. Absolutely. Oh, and I was just going to mention quickly, we did talk a little bit about bullying this morning. And so sometimes just being that safe place, the library may be the safe place in a emotional or physical way even. And then also, us as staff members being able to be that positive adult in their lives and to know that we see them is really important.
I think it's also important to keep giving them choices. So you asked them to help last week and they didn't really want to help. Ask them again this week because maybe they're up for it now, or they saw how much fun they had last time and now they want to participate. Just because they said no once doesn't mean they're going to continue to say no. So keep making those offers, keep making those suggestions.
Great point, Mary Beth. Right, well, we're almost near the end of our time together. So I wanted to give you, and this is just for you, we're not going to share a document here or anything, but just give you a couple minutes to think about what ideas or strategies you might take from this training, and then steps you might take this week, this month, or this year. And it may be even less than 2 minutes this time. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to get to the evaluation, and that takes about 5 minutes to do. So if you want to get to you can work from my screen here. I'll leave this up for the next minute, or you can, Mary Beth has put a link to the action plan in the chat as well. So go ahead and think for a couple minutes and jot down some notes as you wish. All right, everybody. We've already done questions and discussion, so I kind of got those out of order. Sorry we had such a short time on the action plan. I like to leave a little more time for it, but we had such a great conversation that I'm glad we spent our time doing that. I see Linda has something in the chat here. In Lebanon, our children are still predominantly preschool or early elementary with few exceptions. The exceptions come only when out of school for break or summer. Our summer plans are very live animals, so hoping to engage some of them. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I should say, I'm always willing to talk about teen services. So anything that came up today or anything you want to talk about with teen services, get in touch with me at NEKLS. Be happy to talk with you. Okay, our last thing for today is to do the evaluation. So the link is in the chat. And as I mentioned, this is a grant funded program. So they would like for us to get everybody to complete evaluation. So if you would please do that, go to the link and then it will ask you about the outcomes. So those are listed there for you. I will leave them on my screen. And when you are finished with the evaluation, you are free to go. Some of the CKLS staff and I will hang around for afterwards. So if there was a little bit more you wanted to talk about, come on back over and we will talk. So thank you all, everybody. This was a wonderful session. I really appreciate your sharing your thoughts and experiences.
Thank you so much, Anna. This was a very good session and I have lots of notes and hope to come back to it too. And I was very happy. Thank you, libraries, for all your interaction and comments and work today. It's made a very good conversation. It's kind of hard to do a workshop like this online, but you guys handled it very well. So thank you. I think I will go ahead and stop recording, but we will